Now, let's move on to a very straightforward question. Let's do one more question. Let's try out this one. This is again a critical reasoning problem, and generally people do tend to get confused with this one. So try this one. I'll just read the stimulus and see if you have a good grasp of it, and then let's start. To you in the question itself. You're not supposed to, step inside the shoes of the CEO or the CFO to figure out what is the basis for evaluating whether the CFO should divest the company of his flagship product or not. Right? You can see the last line of the question very clearly, explicitly tells you that CFO recommended that the company stop producing this product. Why? Because CEO only wants products whose profit margins are increasing. So if you look at the reason for CFO to stop producing the product, it is basically because CEO only wants products whose profit margins are increasing. And you have to be very clear as to what is the criteria. Here, we are only supposed to be concerned about the profit margins of the products. We are not really concerned about the overall company over here, right? So we are only concerned about the profit margins of the flagship product, which the CFO is basically suggesting that the company should divest. Now, once you're clear with that, right? Once you're clear with the fact that, okay, we are concerned about the flagship product's profit margins, then all you need to do is quickly scan the options and see which are the ones that even relate with the product to begin with. Anything that goes outside the scope of the product, anything that basically concerns the overall company, is something that's beyond the scope of the criteria that we have to use for evaluation. So, option A, if you read this, it says, does the company have new and profitable products available with which to replace the flagship product? Now, understand this question only makes sense if you're concerned about the company. This question doesn't even take into account whether it is possible for us to make the flagship product profitable or not. So option A is basically about the company, which exceeds the scope of the criteria that we're given in the question. If you read option B, it says, will the rest of the company's management team agree with CFO's recommendation? It's again exceeding the scope of the passage altogether. Concerned about the company, we are not concerned about the company. We're only concerned about the flagship product's profit margins. C, are there additional features which could be added to the product for which consumers might be willing to pay a higher price? This makes sense. This is actually about the product. So at least let's hold on to it and we'll come back to it to see if in case it's the best of the lot. D says, is there a way to alter manufacturing or distribution processes in order to reduce the cost to produce the flagship product? Now, this is again concerned about the flagship product, not about the overall company. So C and D are good answer choices to get down to. E talks about what percentage of companies' revenues is represented by the sales of the flagship product. Now, please understand, this is again concerned about the overall company's revenues. We are not concerned about the overall company's revenues at all. We are just concerned about the profit margin of the flagship product. So, can you see that A, B, and E? You can actually eliminate each of these options based on just a very simple reason that they are going beyond the criteria that CFO has used to recommend that the company should divest the product. They're all going outside that criteria. So A, B, and E, very quick to eliminate because they're exceeding the scope, gets you down to C and D. Now, between C and D, you need to understand which one's stronger out of these two because at the end of it, both of them are talking about the product. Now, C says that you need to add features and then the consumers might be willing to pay a higher price. But don't you think that we have to assume a few things in order for us to say this will lead to an increase in profit margins? Because if you were to add a feature, that could incur a cost of its own, right? If you add a feature, that could have a cost of its own. And we don't know if the consumers are willing to pay as much as it takes to cover the cost of the feature, right? So even if you were to add a feature and people start paying you more, it doesn't mean the profit margins have to increase because we don't know if they're willing to pay you as much as it takes to cover the cost of the feature. So option C is definitely wrong because it doesn't give us that conclusive understanding of whether profit margins are definitely going to increase or not going to increase. And that's why option D is such a good answer. It directly hits the nail on the head. See, in the question, we understand that profit margins have to take into account only two things: selling price and cost price. In the question, we are given that consumers who were surveyed reported they weren't willing to pay more than the current price. Now, if they're not willing to pay more than the current price, if you want to increase the profit margins, increasing selling price is not really an option as far as the question is concerned. That basically then gets you to the other variable, which is cost price. If there is a way for you to reduce the cost price, that can then help you to increase the profit margins. And this is exactly what option D is talking about. Is there a way to reduce the cost to produce the product? If there is a way to reduce the cost to produce the product, then CFO is wrong, right? His recommendation will be significantly weakened because if there is a way to reduce the cost, that would mean the profit margin can go up, and then he doesn't have a strong reason to recommend that the company should divest that product. On the other hand, if you say there is no way for the cost price to be brought down, in that case, CFO's recommendation is strengthened, right? Because in that case, if CFO were to say that there is no way for us to reduce the cost to produce the product, and the profit margins don't go up, then definitely it is in line with the CEO's mandate. CEO only wants products whose profit margins are increasing. So if you can't reduce the cost price, chances are you can't increase the profit margin, and you might as well divest it. So if you take this particular option to two extremes, you get a conclusive answer. Should we or should we not divest the company of the flagship product? If the answer to this question is yes, there is a way to reduce the cost price, then we should not divest the company of the flagship product. If the answer to this question is no, there is no way to reduce the cost price, in that case, we should definitely divest the company of the flagship product. So you get a conclusive answer as soon as you take this option to extremes, and that's one of the hallmarks of the most important question to ask. Right, the most important question to ask will have this hallmark that when you take it to two extremes, one is going to give you a conclusive strengthener, and the other is going to give you a conclusive weakener to whatever the basis for evaluation is. So D would then come out to be your answer for this question.